Insurgency Sandstorm, do you guys remember that old game? Well, it's just dropped one of its more substantial updates that it's had in what feels like years, which adds a fantastic new map, 2 new guns, a bunch of other features. Honestly, it's surprising seeing this game getting quality updates this long after launch, especially when you consider 7 months ago, Embracer Group announced that New World Interactive, the original development studio, was being shut down. Let's talk about this update in the future of Insurgency. So Saber Interactive has been the owning company of Insurgency Sandstorm for quite a while, the same company that's working on that cool new Warhammer 40k game. They've been making DLC releases for Insurgency for a bit, and while I don't know all the details of the New World Interactive shutdown, a bunch of the devs seem to have remained working on Insurgency under Saber Interactive. It's unclear to me how big the team is or how many have transitioned over, but they do have a roadmap for several updates beyond this one that seem like they could breathe some fresh life into this now over 6-year-old game. They just pushed update 1.16 live, aka Operation Crisis. It adds a new map called Train Yard that honestly is one of the game's best looking maps to date. It also adds 2 new bolt action sniper rifles for the marksman class, the TAC 338 and the L96A1. Pretty iconic rifles that probably were some of your favorites in one game or another over the years. The update also includes a new limited time arms race mode, aka gun game, which is, well, not my favorite if I'm being honest. And so while a single new map and a few new guns might not seem like that amazing to somebody who's been playing Insurgency very regularly, for somebody who's been playing mostly just mod updates for Insurgency for a while, seeing an official update with some actual content in it is certainly a nice treat. Now, easily the highlight of Operation Crisis for me is the map Train Yard. Maps in Sandstorm are pretty hit or miss in my opinion, at least visually speaking. Some of them, like Prison and Last Light, are pretty impressive looking, but a lot of the other maps feel very dated by today's standards and honestly just kind of generic. Train Yard is still clearly confined to the technical limitations of Insurgency being on the indie side of things, but the lighting, atmosphere, asset quality, and general aesthetics of the map is absolutely S tier. And the night variant of this map might actually be the best night map in the game right now. The skybox and fire scattered around the map make it just bright enough to see without needing those NVGs, but it's also not so bright that you wouldn't benefit from having at least a flashlight on your gun. In my opinion, it's pretty rare for games to do night maps well. They're either super realistic, which is most Insurgency maps, and they're just super dark and totally reliant on NVGs, or they're crazy bright so that you can see everything without NVGs. This seems like a very nice hybrid of the two. It feels real, but also caters to the gameplay. Now, as for how the map actually plays, it's got some good and bad elements like you would expect from any Insurgency map. The huge amount of angles and sightlines that you're exposed to in the open areas can make it really frustrating trying to get to some of the objectives. I had plenty of lives that ended very quickly because the enemy team managed to flank the objective and just sneak up towards our spawn area. I also died to a lot of enemies that were just hanging out in random windows and nooks of the map that you'd never think to check twice, but that's honestly par for the course when it comes to tactical FPS games like Sandstorm. And of those more tactical games, Sandstorm's probably one of the least annoying games in terms of getting killed out of nowhere and not really understanding why. In general, if you die, you can usually tell from where, and it's often your fault for sprinting without checking corners and sightlines. The best part of the gameplay on this map, though, has to be the objective areas. It feels like Saber really paid attention to how Sandstorm typically plays, with defenders camping from positions and then giving them ample cover, while the attackers are forced into them with nothing but hopes and prayers. This time around, the objectives in the 2-story building have plenty of openings and flanking rests that help you avoid those stair choke points. One of the objectives literally has a hole in the 2nd floor that you can basically shoot through or throw grenades through to try and get the campers out. And these kind of conscious map design choices really help to balance out the attacking and defending difficulty, so it feels feels almost dead centered. Neither side has a total advantage over the other, and it makes each match play out more uniquely compared to some of the other maps. Now, one of the things that started to get a bit old with Insurgency Sandstorm is that, well, the game is called Sandstorm and all the aesthetics are vaguely Middle Eastern locations. And while that seems like it makes more sense for a game that was meant to have a 2 to 3 year long lifespan before the next title came out to replace it, now that Insurgency has been going on for over 6 years, still sticking to the nothing but vague Middle Eastern map stylings does tend to get a little bit old, and it's unfortunate that Trainyard has to once again fit into that same styling. Obviously not a huge critique, I think I'm just mostly wanting to see more stuff come out of the Insurgency universe. As for the new guns, well, they're very pretty. They're bolt-action sniper rifles in a game where you die almost instantly to just about any gun, so using a bolt-action rifle in this game is always going to be pretty challenging. Unsurprisingly, their usefulness is limited to extreme long-range firefights, which usually also means you have to have a good idea of how the map flows so that you can set up in the proper points at the proper time. They're very cool, very nicely modeled additions to the game, but I honestly found myself using my sidearm a bit more just to get around the map than I was actually using my bolt-action rifles. Perhaps if I played Insurgency a bit more and really knew the maps like the back of my hand, I would enjoy this class a little bit more, but it's not something that feels like you can just hop into like a Battlefield game and start getting some sniper kills pretty quick. Now, aside from some of the purchasable cosmetic content that came with this update, one of the last things added is a limited time mode called Arms Race. This is basically a team deathmatch style gun game mode where the team that has the player that gets a kill with the final weapon first wins, which is sort of a weird way to do it. And with Sandstorm's TTK being so fast, a more casual mode like this just doesn't really do it for me. I played a match and most players spent their time just holding down a building. It was fine, but I do think Sandstorm's strength is going to be more in the objective focused PvP and PvE modes. Overall though, and speaking as more of a casual fan of the game, I think Saber really hit this update out of the park. The game feels like it's evolving, despite being old and still feeling a little bit indie jank. They're clearly cooking with some premium gas for this update, but what will the future updates for this game look like? The devs have actually announced both a 1.17 and 1.18 patch that are in the works to come out later this year, and with Saber recently adding a next-gen console update for the game, 1.17 will bring cross-play with all the features that you wish your AAA games had, like input-based matchmaking, pretty darn cool, and the ability to just opt out of crossplay altogether. Plus more bug fixes, some pretty big overhauls to the lighting engine, and I would expect more maps and weapons along the way. Personally, I'd love to see mod support get more fleshed out. Mods have become one of my favorite ways to re-engage with Insurgency over the years, but I'd love to see Steam Workshop support and a proper in-game menu for playing modded maps. Currently, the barrier to entry with mods is still fairly high for newcomers. You won't be spinning up a dedicated server for new mod maps without some technical know-how, and I'd love to see tools added to the game that make that process just easier. And every time I jump back into Insurgency, I realize just how strong the base game is, the core concept of the game, and since it's developed on Unreal Engine and they seem to be working on a bunch of updates for it, I'd be curious to see if either this game gets updated to Unreal Engine 5 at some point with some of that cool lighting technology being thrown in eventually, or if they're just planning a completely new Insurgency game down the line. We do know that there's some sort of projects that have been worked on behind the scenes that we don't quite know about yet, so I'll be keeping my ears open in case any news about those comes out down the road. Anyway, I think it's cool that Insurgency has finally gotten a good, real, official update for it after so long, and it's certainly a reason to come back and check out the game, especially if you own it. Have any of you been hopping back into Insurgency recently? I'd be curious to know in the comments, and if so, what's your favorite part about the game? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop me a like, subscribe for more content like it, ding that notification bell to beat the YouTube algorithm with me, and up next, check out what Insurgency Sandstorm plays like in VR. It's actually an incredible experience, one of the best looking VR games that I've played. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.